So yeah, just from the top, I started doing local market podcasts, interviewing realtors. My goal in the probably closer to Christmas would be to do a lot with local business people as well to get an understanding for how we can support them in the local context. The reason being, like earlier this year when COVID first happened, I was interviewing a lot of people who really touched on the macro picture well, like how this looks for the Canadian economy. But I think it's really evolving to be a story of where people are going outside of the urban areas now in Ontario, especially. And that's why I've wanted to interview you and a bunch of other realtors to get an understanding for what's happening out there from local experts who are really seeing it firsthand. So if you could quickly just start off with an introduction of yourself for those who aren't familiar, and then we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be here. So my name is Dayna Langlois, and my brand is Sarnia Sold. So I am a realtor in Sarnia. I was actually born and raised in Windsor, and I lived in London for a number of years as well. So I'm very familiar with many areas in southwestern Ontario. It's really actually exciting that you reached out to me. I find this awesome because, going back 5-10 years ago, Sarnia was didn't exist. Past London wasn't really a thing to anyone outside of this area. So just the fact that we are getting noticed a little bit more, it has a lot of exciting things to offer. And that's kind of what the brand I've created is, to bring some more awareness to our community.
Yeah, I feel like you do a lot of like really, almost function as like a little bit of a tourism thing there, right? Like you've really done a lot to bring awareness to the area too. How would you describe, I guess you could do sort of qualitatively, like what's Sarnia like and all about if you're trying to sell it to somebody, or if somebody from the city said, I'm trying to decide between 3 different places to live. Can you tell me about your town? And then also, could you tell me about sort of where the market's at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question because I'm actually not born here. I chose Sarnia. So I really have that outside perspective as to why. The best way I can describe it really metaphorically from someone that isn't local, but many of your followers and listeners are from the GTA. So if you picture basically Queen Street West, that very supportive local, out and about parks, trails, atmosphere, that's Sarnia as a city. Sarnia is an amazing, amazing city where local businesses, local entrepreneurs thrive. I think we have more local, I know we have more local businesses, more local restaurants, more local grocers than any chains, and they do really, really well. So it's a very tight-knit city that just supports each other, and really, you don't really see the business competition. Of course, there's always healthy competition, but you really see business empowerment in a way that is unlike anywhere else I've ever seen. So that's amazing if you are a small business owner. If you are a female entrepreneur or an entrepreneur of any sort, it's really a great place to incubate and launch businesses. We have a huge, huge community of social media as well, which is great. And the proximity, like obviously right now our borders are closed, but the proximity to the States, definitely a selling feature as well. 45 minutes from London, an hour and a half from Windsor. So it's great if you do have investment properties in either location or kind of have that middle ground.
Right. Great. How, just out of curiosity, I know this isn't in the notes, but have you, like, given your experience in looking at other areas, and you mentioned you have friends sort of all over the province, have you felt that local business support network has kind of almost created a bit of a resilience against what's happening right now to a lot of small businesses in this COVID world? Like, when this first happened and the lockdowns started, you could really only go to like McDonald's, Tim Hortons, whatever, right? Like, at least in the GTA, that's sort of how it shaped out to be. And now, you're looking at probably, by the time this is said and done, like 60% of restaurants potentially closing in the GTA. The small businesses. Do you think that Sarnia might be more well equipped and maybe perhaps a better model for what we should be looking for in cities moving forward, sort of in a post-COVID world?
I think better is a hard word because every model is a little bit different, and how we function as a city is obviously very different from the GTA. But the resilience is definitely, I had no idea that was happening in your world. And that actually is very, very heartbreaking because the support local here is unbelievable. Obviously, COVID was a time that no one expected, no one could forecast, and no one could predict what was about to happen. But as we saw things start to change and things close down, Sarnia banded together like a community in a way that I've never seen before. Every business pivoted and innovated, which was so cool. We saw local breweries doing delivery to your front door of make your own Caesar kits. We had pizza
Right.
shops that were doing for the kids. They had like little pizza kits. Even a local store that I shop at quite frequently, a nutrition place, was doing vitamin drop off. So you would just call them, they would drop it off right to your front door. So I actually think a lot of our businesses were able to adapt, and the community was so strong. It's very unique to see that people were actually pushing back against the big name stores, pushing back against restaurants. And I get it, they employ many people too, so I don't want to see any business hurt in this situation. But it was really empowering to see how every business began to thrive. And we even had a situation, I think this speaks to the community as a whole. We had a situation with a restaurant in town a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, they got a bad batch of a vegetable and ended up with salmonella poisoning for people in the city. So the impact was substantial to the business. They were shut down for a few weeks. Upon their reopen, the entire city banded together and people were lined up for hours outside of the door just to kind of relaunch them. So I think that story is one of many smaller stories that just show that the community as a whole. So yes, it could be a point of reference for other cities, but I don't know if our model would work in other cities.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. It does require like a really tight knit community and infrastructure to make something like that happen. How much, before we get into like the specifics of the real estate market, how much of what you just described is like part of the purchasing process for people? Like do you find that people want to, they like that qualitative element, the heart of the purchase is something that's important for people when they're considering moving to a place, especially like because I remember you mentioning you saw a lot of people moving almost from the GTA or from more urban areas, maybe a London or somewhere else in southwestern Ontario, but a larger city. How does that whole thing factor in?
Well, I do think the biggest part of when it comes to residential purchases is the emotional aspect as well. It's really unique if someone comes from out of town. Like I just had a client that moved from Orangeville. They told me some of the things they like to do. I wrote down a list of places for them to go, and I said, oh, ask for this person, they're the owner, or ask for this special. So I think it does add that personal touch, and it makes it feel like home. Obviously, if you're moving from out of town, like I did as well, you're not sure how to feel, you're not sure where you fit in, you're not sure where your home is. So having those personal touches where they know they can say, Dayna recommended I come here and say hi to the owner so-and-so. I think it just creates more of that sense of community that we feel and we want others to feel as well.
Right. And when you talked about the type of purchaser who's coming, like a lot of, and maybe it's a selection bias again, like because we're young, we attract that type of client. But you have mentioned that there's a lot of people, because one of the big things I've been hearing in the GTA especially is, and especially getting close to the U.S. border, like you're sort of Niagara on the Lake and stuff like that, is a lot of boomers who are just advancing retirement plans. They're like, yeah, I was going to retire in 5 years anyway. But you're saying it's like a lot more young families, right? Who are.
Yeah, so I just actually pulled the stats last night because we talked about this briefly the other day. So I didn't want to use just my clients as an example. I pulled our board stats for just the last month. And we had 5 people moving here for retirement and 13 people under the age of 38.
Wow.
So huge difference.
Yeah.
So what we see in Sarnia is kind of unique in that way. We're seeing so many different trends, and I know we'll kind of get into that in a second, but we do have a really great we have great employment opportunities. We have all of the petrochemical plants. We have active work, and it has been resilient to COVID. We haven't really stopped. We haven't seen the hit that unfortunately many other places have seen. We kind of are a resilient bubble, and I've always kind of described it as big cities often, and I don't live there, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I see extreme highs, extreme lows. We don't have that. We kind of have that gradual growth, but we don't have that huge hit either. So that's the contrast.
Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, I think the stat came out yesterday actually that the Toronto was the worst, the highest unemployment percentage, I believe. Yeah, in I don't know if it was the country or the province, but I mean, still, it makes sense, right? Because there's so many tertiary businesses around the financial core there that are, they're like a lot of them are just functionally obsolete right now. Restaurants, gyms, a lot of the lifestyle stuff, and like.
Well, you guys are down again, aren't you?
What's that? Sorry.
You guys shut down again?
Yeah, so we have like in Toronto, York Region, and Peel. I think Durham is out of it, but so most of the GTA is in what they're calling like a red zone, which is basically like everything's shut down, and yeah, you really can't like there's like not even a way that you can support a local business. Like you can really only use drive-through restaurants.
Which is so neat to hear you say, because I was actually having this conversation. I practice yoga on my spare time, so even a yoga studio in town, her first reaction when she heard what was going on in Toronto, she reached out to studios and asked if they'd be willing to come down here and teach. That's just the sense of community we have when you kind of feel someone else is hurting.
Yeah.
Hey, here's an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's nice to see, honestly, and I think in the GTA especially, you get caught up in like this hustle and bustle, and like the real estate market, even if you like, people will describe it as competitive, but like it actually like feels competitive. Like people, like everything, like a lot of it is just like showmanship, and like I don't know, like the whole thing is it's just kind of unhinged from like that. What I think is really what is a part of the Canadian culture is that the culture that you're describing. I guess if you're talking about the competition in the market, how crazy have things gotten there statistically, like because you said like some of the numbers, like I've heard certain areas, especially like in the GTA, some of the fringe areas like your Keswick, Barrie, like areas that were really blowing up in 2017 before the crash, have gone crazy, but like they would probably be the only ones comparable to the figures that you described on the phone when we spoke.
Yeah, so again, I just pulled our numbers for last month as well, just so I could have more of an accurate number. It is busy. I don't think I've had a day off this year. I don't see signs of it slowing. I know we're approaching typically what are the slower months, but I mean, I just listed a house on Monday that's going into competition tomorrow. So when I'm telling you my numbers, these are obviously extreme growth for here, but they're still astronomically lower than what you're probably used to seeing. But just in comparison, in the month of October, from year over year, so from last year to this year, we've had a 79% increase in the number of sales.
Yeah, no, that's bigger than the GTA for sure. That's insane.
It's crazy. And just year over year, our price points have switched. So last year, the average price point was $336, and now we're looking at $402. So substantial growth there. Still the average price point, and this is why this is becoming such a hot market for people outside of Southwestern Ontario. I mean, the average price point of a house is $450 to $499.
Right.
And we do see quite a few still in the 320s to 339 range too. So huge opportunities. And those aren't just like, move in, gut jobs. These are nice houses.
Right. Yeah, I would say like there's maybe two other areas in the province that you can get a city like you're describing, walkability, some sort of urbanization, like, a couple of tall buildings, a downtown core, and buy a house at the price that you're saying. Like maybe I'm thinking like Sudbury, maybe, but even then it's like a bit of a stretch.
It's cold, right?
Yeah. And then like, I think the next one would be like maybe Cornwall, but like, that's not even really like, that's a small city and a much different vibe, I would say, than Sarnia. And I think the weather is quite like temperate by comparison to the rest of Ontario for like Sarnia. Right?
Yeah. And here's the big thing about Sarnia too. So I did mention, some of the selling points are the states, our community, but our beaches. We have some of the most beautiful, swimmable, usable beaches. Like Sarnia is a summer city. You find every summer, everyone's out on their boats, everyone's out on the lake. Like our beaches are some of the most beautiful beaches in Ontario. It's not me saying that, it's fact. So that's another feature as well. You can get lakeside houses for less than $1 million.
Right. Yeah. And I think like that's coming in, I guess, how much of that do you see in the market right now? Like because where I am, like I'm right on Lake Simcoe here, about an hour north of Toronto. Actually, I mean, it's not actually, it's like maybe a half hour, 45 minutes now that we have the highway, but we've always just said an hour. But same thing, beaches, the lake, recreational culture, cottages, waterfront. And it's just gone insane for that, especially for that type of product, because everybody's like, okay, I'm probably not gonna get an airplane for the next, year, maybe 2 years. So they want like that staycation element. Like, is it the same thing? Like it's a blend of the work from home, wanting more space, and the staycation, or a lot of people moving there maybe to pursue different career opportunities?
So I would say there's 4 big factors that have really exploded our market in the past little while. So number one factor is people just leaving the GTA. People are leaving the GTA and coming down here, really. And it's because, I mean, COVID, obviously COVID has changed our lives, has changed our real estate, has changed even our own personal values for many people. So people are or do have the ability to work from home. They don't need to worry about the commute time as much. So we're seeing people that can work from anywhere that want a little bit more square footage, that want more of a house, that want more land, so more of a lifestyle. So they're able to sell these, condos that are $1 million, $2 million in the GTA, come down here, buy a 4,400 square foot house on the lake for $1 million and still have cash in their pocket, plus a lifestyle. So that is a huge, huge factor we are seeing that people are leaving the GTA. The ability to work from home is substantial. We're also seeing people that have gone, if you're living in a smaller space, COVID, you've been quarantined with your family, a little stir crazy. So we are seeing people upgrading the space. And the other two trends I cannot deny, they're not, and they might be happening there as well, but we are just seeing higher divorce rates. So selling one house, buying two.
Yeah.
And then the COVID baby boom is coming. So who knows
Yeah.
what that will be.
You think that's a thing?
I mean, we'll see if it's a thing.
Yeah, it appears to be. Generally, like, how would you characterize, or how would you, if you were to take like the sort of mindset of the people that you just characterized, how do people feel like, and how are things different sort of pre-COVID to today, and how are people sort of looking at the market and talking about it or evaluating it or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So you kind of mentioned something as well that does really coincide with that. So you did mention Airbnb staycations. That I think is on a lot of people's minds this year. So I'm very blessed. I had some great, great listings this year, very unique, but three of which have become Airbnbs. So that I think is on a lot of people's minds. I had one of the most unique properties I've ever had the privilege of selling, which is now named the Plimpton. It's kind of a staycation. So it's a converted 1800s chapel that is now a thriving Airbnb. So people aren't just purchasing for the sake of more square footage. They're purchasing with the business intent. And because Airbnb is so thriving this year with the inability to fly, I think that is definitely changing people's mentalities as well and how they purchase.
Is that becoming like a sort of a new investment trend? Like, I know Sarnia has been a relatively stable rental market for a while. As I mentioned, like I used to work for a REIT who was doing a bit of acquisition in that area, so I know I'm quite familiar with it. But like in the GTA, you get a lot of small cap investors who are buying like a condo, in the city to rent out or to Airbnb, or duplexes or whatever in smaller towns. Has the sentiment from your investor clientele changed from a long-term rental to a short-term rental? Is it like a noticeable enough trend, or is it kind of just this fringe thing right now?
I mean, I can't predict what the trend will be in the future, but as of right now, I think it's more of a substantial mindset than it is rental. Obviously, rental market's always there, but we have to keep in mind if we're seeing even last month alone a 79% increase in value, properties, and number of sales, how could rent possibly increase at that same volume? So in order to actually have a break-even point, you actually have more gains coming from an Airbnb where you're charging, $250 to $350 a night.
Mm-hmm.
You can make more than you would in rent. So I think right now, because our market sprung up so quickly and our rental market hasn't leveled out to be that. And honestly, for the sake of people renting, I do hope that there is affordable rent. Yeah, like that it does stay that way.
Well, like the rental market by nature, like the average price can't really accelerate because so many people are rent controlled, right? Like, and especially with, I think we're going to see probably a net decline in rent across the board here because you're not seeing a ton of turnover, and the landlords don't really have the ability to turn anything over, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we both know, and I'm sure many others as well, that the landlord guidelines aren't like they used to be. So it's not as appealing to become a landlord unless you really know what you're getting into. Like you're doing your homework, you're making sure that you're protected.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Is there any acknowledgement of risk associated when you're talking about like the short-term stuff? Like, do people seem to think about whether or not this market, like the Airbnb market, will still be as strong in a post-COVID world, or is it pretty immediate, like how they're evaluating these opportunities?
I wish I had a crystal ball for some of these questions, but the perfect example is I'll refer back to this Plimpton Chapel. So I actually got that listing and went public with it the day the world shut down.
Right.
So I am listing an Airbnb the day that COVID hits and our entire world shut down. So that raised numerous questions about the Airbnb market, whether we'd ever have travel again, whether we'd ever have these opportunities. That obviously did shut down for about a month. Once it came back stronger. I can't predict what future trends will be, but what I can say now is that, I've actually sold and work with 3 clients that are strong Airbnb investors, and they're fully booked for the rest of the year. So
yeah, anybody I know who's doing it, like I've worked with a lot as well, and most of them are booked until the end of 2021 at this point, which is pretty wild. I guess
and just think about all the opportunities, like the wedding venues. And these aren't, your typical, obviously your Airbnbs are very different than ours. We're not talking about condos here. We're talking about cabins in the woods, converted chapels. We're talking about experiences.
Yeah.
And people are craving that so much right now after being in quarantine.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree completely. I guess the question is how sustainable is it? But I think actually, from my perspective, I think this has really caused us to evaluate like what we have on our own front doorstep, right? Like, people that you see like hiking and like going to find like waterfalls and whatever in Ontario, it's like, people didn't even know, like they would just leave to go and get their Instagram pictures or whatever.
Yeah.
And now it's like, but so it's really nice to see. And I hope that has some permanence in the sentiment of people that, we all sort of appreciate our home a little bit more.
I do too.
Yeah. I try not to make people forecast too much, but like based on the trends that you've seen, what does the next sort of like 4 to 6 months and then maybe a year look like in Sarnia for you? Like you're just going to see more of the same, probably some price growth, like things are still hot and no sign of slowing down?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I'm having this conversation with my clients. This is the time of the year that as agents, when you are sitting down with clients, you're debating, do I list now or do I list in the spring? Obviously, there's personal motivators for every situation. Sometimes there's no other choice but to list now. But right now, we're still seeing a very strong market. Like I mentioned, I have a house going into multiple offers tomorrow. I have a new listing coming next week. I do think the biggest thing when it comes to the next 4 to 6 months is the weather. And, we're in Ontario. If you have a very cold winter, your housing market is impacted by that. Less people are shopping for houses because they don't really want to leave and go out there unless they have an actual reason to. But in saying that, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, you're getting more quality instead of quantity buyers.
Yeah, for sure.
So
the people who are out there want to be buying.
Exactly. Yeah. No one wants to be out there in the snow looking for a new house unless they have to be. Yeah. But I don't see signs of it changing.
Okay.
As of right now, we're still in green zone, so we don't have any lockdowns. We don't have, I don't even know if we have many active cases, maybe 7 at most.
Must be nice.
That might be more than we actually have. So we have been pretty, like I said, all I can do is refer back to what I said in the beginning. We're a tight-knit community. We followed the rules. We played right. We've listened to the regulations, and we're staying green. So I think we're safe.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't get a chance to touch on before we sign off?
No, but I'll flip that back to you because, obviously Sarnia is probably new to you, not to you in particular, but many of your listeners and followers. So if you have any questions or anything of interest, I guess I'm happy to answer any of that.
Okay, cool. Well, what I'll do is I typically ask people like where, because I post a lot of stuff on Instagram, YouTube, et cetera, and where people can reach out to you if they are interested, like, if an investor is interested in taking a look at Sarnia or, just curious as to what kind of opportunities, Airbnbs, et cetera, like where would you prefer that people reach out to you?
Yep. So super simple. My Instagram name is Sarnia Sold. It's hard to forget. I'm very active on social media, and I found that's the way that I've been able to reach, people like yourself by having that social media presence. So I have a very strong social media presence. I have a strong marketing background as well, and that's probably the best way to reach me. Instagram's a great community and environment as well to chat.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll post that in the show notes then. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. The insight was amazing, and it was really, really nice to get to know a new market that I've had some experience in the past, but I think a lot of people kind of slips through the cracks, I think. And
Yeah.
I'd heard so many investors like going out to Windsor, London, et cetera. But I was like, I guess it seems like you guys are finally getting your time to shine, which is a good thing. Yeah.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Yeah. Good.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.